The daughter of a servant said to the vampire king, "My mother bears a mark like yours." Then this happened. Silver moonlight draped over the towering spires of the castle, and shadows danced along the stone walls like quiet whispers of old secrets. In the valleys and narrow streets below, the people moved like ants, unaware of the ancient powers that lingered in the air, waiting. Among them was Ilara, the daughter of a servant, who had learned long ago that her place in the world was meant to be unseen. Her mother, a woman of quiet strength and gentle hands, had once served in the grand halls of the castle. But stories of her mother's past were mostly whispers, kept away from the ears of those who might ask too many questions. Ilara herself had inherited a strange mark on her wrist, a mark identical to one said to be borne only by the vampire king. Many believed the king to be a creature of myth, a figure wrapped in stories of sorrow, power, and an eternal loneliness that even the stars feared to touch. Ilara's life was simple, or at least she made it seem so. She cleaned the halls, ran errands, and avoided the nobles who often treated the servants as invisible. But every night she would steal away to the outer gardens, to a hidden patch of moonlit flowers where she could think, dream, and wonder about the world beyond her small, quiet life. And every night, her gaze would drift to the castle's tallest tower, where shadows moved behind the high windows, and the faintest glimmer of eyes seemed to watch her in return. It was on one such night, when the wind carried the scent of cold stone and ancient blood, that Ilara found herself standing at the edge of the royal courtyard, staring at the figure that had appeared seemingly from nowhere. Cloaked in black, tall and imposing, he seemed almost to be made of shadow. His eyes glimmered in the moonlight, a deep red that seemed to pull at the very edges of her soul. "You," she began, her voice trembling though she tried to steady it. "Your market, it looks like my mother S." The king's gaze fell upon her, sharp and piercing. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves in the night. Werewolf, the vampire king, had not spoken to a living human in decades. Most were afraid to even breathe his name. Yet here was a young girl, bold enough to speak truth in his presence. He did not move closer, though he could have in a heartbeat. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying her with the careful patience of a predator, yet with a faint trace of curiosity. "Your mother," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper that seemed to echo through the courtyard. "Your mother served here once long ago." "Do you know what that cost her?" Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. She had heard rumors, yes, of her mother's time in the castle, but never the details. She shook her head, feeling both fear and a strange pull toward him. I do not know," she admitted. "But the mark, the one on my wrist, it is the same as yours. I've never seen anything like it before, and I've never seen anyone with it alive." Veilric's eyes darkened. The mark was a symbol of both power and a curse, an imprint of the ancient magic that ran through his veins. It was said to bind those who bore it to sorrow, to duty, and sometimes to isolation so deep that even the night would pity them. To see it mirrored on a mortal child stirred memories he had long tried to bury, memories of loss, of betrayal, and of a fleeting hope that had been extinguished long ago. "You carry what should not have survived," he said, his tone sharp but tinged with something unrecognizable. "How did you come to bear this mark?" Ilara swallowed, feeling the weight of the centuries pressing down upon her. "I don't know," she said softly. "My mother, she never spoke of it. She just said I must be careful, that some things in this castle are not meant for the living." Veilric's gaze softened, but only for a moment. Centuries had taught him caution, the way ice forms over deep waters to hide the fire beneath. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her, yet not touching her. "You are brave to speak to me," he said, "brave and foolish. There is danger in knowing the truth of the mark." Ilara looked up at him, her eyes steady despite the fear curling in her chest. "I want to know," she said. "If it is dangerous, I still want to know. I need to understand." The king's eyes narrowed, studying her as if weighing her soul. Few had ever asked for knowledge in the presence of the Vampire King. Fewer still had asked for the truth with such courage. And though he would not admit it aloud, her courage stirred something long buried within him, a faint echo of longing he had believed lost forever. "The mark," he began slowly, "is not merely a symbol, it is a bond. A chain that ties blood to sorrow, power to isolation, life to death. Those who bear it are chosen, marked, and haunted. It has been my burden, my curse, and now it is yours as well, whether you wish it or not." Alara shivered, yet did not turn away. "If it is a curse, I will face it," she said. "I do not fear what it brings. I want to understand it for my mother and for me." For a long moment, Veilric was silent. The wind swirled around them, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers and the faint tang of blood in the air. Then slowly he extended a hand, not in threat, but in something older, something that had not been offered in lifetimes. "You speak boldly," he said. "Few mortals do. Step closer and I will show you what it means to bear the mark. But know this, once you see, there is no turning back." Alara hesitated for only a heartbeat before placing her hand in his. The contact was electric, and yet it was not pain she felt. It was an understanding, a deep connection to a sorrow she did not yet fully comprehend. The air around them seemed to thrum with unspoken words, and for the first time, the legend of the Vampire King felt alive, terrifying, and achingly real. "You must learn the history," Veilric continued, guiding her toward a hidden door in the castle's outer walls. "History is written in blood and shadow. It is cruel and merciless, but you may yet have the strength to change it." As they moved through narrow corridors, the air grew colder, the shadows longer. Portraits of long-dead kings and queens stared down at them, their eyes seeming to follow Alara as though they knew the secret of her birth. "Why me?" Alara whispered. "Why did the mark choose my mother? And now me?" Veilric did not answer immediately. He paused in a room filled with ancient tomes and scrolls, the faint light of a single lantern casting long shapes across the floor. He traced the edge of one of the books, as though recalling every century of its history. "The mark chooses as it wills," he said finally. "It binds itself to bloodlines, to those who carry the weight of past mistakes. Your mother, she bore it with courage. You may bear it with hope or with despair. That choice is yours alone." Alara studied him, feeling both fear and fascination intertwined like threads in her chest. There was a sadness in him, deep and heavy, but also a spark of something else, a spark that made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. "I do not want despair," she said softly. "I want to understand, to help, maybe even to heal it." Veilric's lips pressed together, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. No one had ever spoken such words to him without trembling in fear first. Yet in her, he saw something dangerous, something alive. A choice, like a flame daring to survive in the coldest winter. Before either of them could speak again, a distant sound echoed through the halls. A soft, almost imperceptible rustle, as though someone had been watching them. Both turned their heads, and for a brief moment the air seemed to still, holding its breath. "You are not alone," Veilric said, his voice dark and warning. "There are those who will come for what you carry and what I guard. You must be careful." "The shadows are patient and cruel." Alara nodded, gripping her mother's mark with quiet determination. "I am not afraid," she said, though her heart raced. "Not if you are with me." Veilric's eyes softened once more, but only for a heartbeat. Then the shadow of a frown returned, for centuries had taught him that attachment always comes with a price. Yet in that fleeting moment, he allowed himself to imagine something he had not dared in 1,000 years, a life where the mark was not only a curse, but a bond, a connection, a chance at something like redemption. As the night deepened, the castle seemed to lean closer, listening to the unspoken understanding between mortal and king, servant and sovereign, cursed and chosen. And somewhere in the hidden corners of the ancient walls, a figure moved silently, watching, waiting, and whispering secrets that would soon collide with their fledgling bond. Alara did not yet know the danger that followed her words. She did not yet know the weight of the choice she had made by speaking the truth. But she felt it, the pull of destiny, sharp and undeniable, and a connection that would not be broken by fear or by shadow or by centuries of sorrow. The Vampire King watched her, and for the first time in countless years, he wondered if perhaps the mark was not just a curse, but a key. And in the silence of the moonlit courtyard, a storm of old secrets and new beginnings stirred, waiting to sweep them both into a world they had only begun to understand. The next morning, the castle seemed even colder than the night before. Sunlight struggled to pierce the thick, gray clouds that hung over the stone walls like a heavy curtain. Alara wandered through the outer corridors, feeling a strange mixture of fear and wonder. Every step she took seemed to echo, as though the castle itself were listening to her thoughts. Vaelric had not spoken much since their encounter in the courtyard. He moved silently, almost like a shadow, and yet his presence was everywhere. Alara could feel his gaze on her, even when he was out of sight. She had seen few things in her life that truly frightened her, but the Vampire King's attention was unlike anything she had imagined. It was both a test and a warning. "You must understand," Vaelric said suddenly, his deep voice cutting through her thoughts, "that the mark you bear is not simply a symbol. It is a bond. It ties you to me, to your mother, and to a fate that stretches far beyond your understanding." Alara swallowed hard, her fingers brushing the faint scar on her wrist. "I want to understand," she said. "I cannot ignore it anymore. I need to know what it means for my mother, for me, for everything." Vaelric studied her carefully, the red gleam of his eyes catching the weak light from the narrow windows. "Very well," he said. "But know this. Knowledge comes with responsibility. It can bring clarity, but it can also awaken danger. Once you step further into this world, there is no returning to the life you had." Alara nodded. She had expected as much. She had lived in shadows for years, carrying the secret of her mark alone. Fear had never stopped her before. And now, standing near the man who was both legend and nightmare, she felt a strange courage stir within her. He led her through winding halls and hidden staircases, places no ordinary servant would dare enter. The air grew colder, the shadows longer, and faint whispers seemed to drift from the walls themselves. The castle had a life of its own, ancient and patient, and Alara felt it watching her with curiosity and suspicion. Finally, they entered a large chamber, lined with shelves of old books, dusty scrolls, and glowing crystals. The room smelled of parchment, incense, and something else, something like iron and distant rain. Vaelric gestured for her to step closer. "This room holds the history of the mark," he said. "Every choice, every bond, every curse ever connected to it has been recorded here. To understand it, you must see the past. You must face what your mother endured, and what you may yet endure." Alara approached the shelves carefully, her eyes wide with awe. Scrolls and books of all sizes seemed to hum with quiet power. She ran her fingers over a thick leather tome, feeling the faint pulse beneath its cover. It was as if the castle itself were alive, offering knowledge but demanding caution in return. Vaelric moved beside her, his gaze sharp. "Be careful," he warned. "The past is not always kind. It can teach, but it can also haunt." Alara opened the tome and found herself staring at intricate drawings of symbols and marks, each one more complex than the last. There were stories of kings and queens, of love and betrayal, of warriors who had carried the mark and been destroyed by it. And then she saw her mother's name, written in careful script alongside a symbol that matched the one on her wrist. Alara whispered, her voice trembling. "She carried it too, just like me." Vaelric nodded slowly. "Your mother was strong, braver than most. But she also suffered. The mark is a chain, and it binds the heart as much as it binds the blood." Alara's eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of understanding. Her mother's life had been more difficult than she had ever imagined. She had faced danger, loneliness, and choices no ordinary person could endure, and now the same destiny was reaching for Alara. "Why me?" she asked softly. "Why did the mark come to us? Why my mother and now me?" Valeric did not answer immediately. He moved to a glowing crystal at the center of the room and placed his hand on it. The light spread across the chamber, and images began to shimmer in the air, visions of past bearers of the mark, their struggles, their moments of courage, their losses. "The mark chooses," Valeric said finally. "It binds itself to bloodlines, to souls capable of endurance and change. It brings both suffering and strength. Your mother endured because she had no choice but to. You endure because you may yet shape what the mark demands." Alara watched the visions, feeling her mother's pain and courage as if it were her own. She saw the nights her mother had spent alone, the dangers she had faced in the shadows, and the quiet moments of hope she had allowed herself despite the darkness. For the first time, Alara understood the depth of her heritage, and a strange pride mingled with sorrow in her chest. Valeric observed her quietly, his expression unreadable. Few had ever reacted to the history of the mark with such clarity and strength. Most had either turned away in fear or been consumed by it, but Alara, she faced it with open eyes, and that both intrigued and unsettled him. "You carry more than a mark," he said. "You carry the choices of those who came before you, and soon you will make your own choices. Choices that may bind you to me or set you apart forever." Alara took a deep breath. "I do not wish to run from it," she said. "I want to understand it, and I want to face it, whatever comes." Valeric's eyes softened, though only slightly. "Very well," he said. "Then you must learn to use the power it grants. You cannot remain a passive bearer. You must embrace it, or it will consume you." Over the next days, Valeric began teaching Alara the subtle ways the mark affected her. It gave her a connection to shadows, a sensitivity to the energies of the world around her, and a faint ability to influence the minds of lesser creatures. Every lesson was difficult, every step demanding courage. And yet, Alara moved forward with determination, her bond with Valeric growing with every moment they spent together. Their interactions were often tense, filled with unspoken questions and quiet challenges. Valeric was strict, demanding discipline and focus. Alara was bold, questioning his methods, testing the limits of her own abilities and refusing to be intimidated. In these moments, the lines between teacher and student blurred. Respect grew into trust, and trust began to blossom into something deeper, an unspoken connection neither fully understood, yet neither could deny. One night, as they trained in a hidden courtyard beneath the full moon, Valeric paused and observed her. The moonlight reflected off her hair, and the mark on her wrist glowed faintly. "You are stronger than I expected," he said quietly. "Stronger than many who bore this mark before you." Alara wiped sweat from her brow, feeling both pride and exhaustion. "I have to be," she replied. "I cannot fail, not after what my mother endured and not after all that you've shown me." Valeric stepped closer, the shadows of the night stretching around them like silent witnesses. "Strength alone will not be enough," he warned. "You must also understand patience, control, and the weight of responsibility. The mark does not forgive mistakes." Alara nodded, sensing the truth in his words. But there was also something else, a flicker of something unspoken in Valeric's eyes. A shadow of emotion, perhaps, or a memory of a time when he had been capable of trust and hope. Before she could speak, a sudden movement in the darkness caught her attention. A figure, cloaked and silent, slipped between the trees at the edge of the courtyard. It was too quick for her to identify, yet Valeric's gaze followed it instantly, sharp and alert. "They are watching," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Those who seek the mark are patient and relentless. You must not let them catch you unprepared." Alara's heart raced, but she did not back away. Instead, she felt a strange determination settle over her. She had come too far to be afraid now. "Then we will face them," she said. Together, Valric's eyes softened again, though only briefly. He could feel the strength in her words, the courage in her stance, and the quiet power she carried within her. For the first time in centuries, he felt the faintest hope that perhaps the mark could bring not only sorrow and duty, but also connection and redemption. The night deepened and the castle seemed to hold its breath, as though aware that the world was about to change. Shadows shifted, wind whispered, and the distant howl of an unknown creature echoed through the hills. Danger was coming, that much was certain. But for now, in the quiet of the courtyard beneath the moon, Valric and Alara stood side by side, ready to face whatever lay ahead. And somewhere in the hidden corners of the castle, the cloaked figure watched, silent and patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Alara did not yet know the full danger that awaited her. She did not yet know the power of the shadowed enemy who had taken an interest in her mark. But she felt it, the pull of destiny, sharp and undeniable, and a bond that was growing stronger with each passing moment. The dance of shadows had begun, and there was no turning back. The forest outside the castle was alive with whispers. Shadows twisted between the trees, and the wind carried the faint scent of rain and soil. Alara and Valric moved carefully along the narrow path, their steps soft but purposeful. The trees seemed older here, ancient witnesses to centuries of secrets and unseen magic. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made Alara's heart race, yet she did not turn back. "We cannot stay in the castle," Valric said, his voice low, almost blending with the whispering wind. "The one who watches is clever and patient. He knows the power you carry. He will try to claim it if we remain in one place." Alara adjusted the cloak around her shoulders, her mark faintly glowing beneath the fabric. "Then we move," she said. "I am ready." Valric's red eyes swept the darkened forest. "Ready does not mean fearless," he reminded her. "Fear is not weakness. It is a tool if you use it wisely." They walked in silence for some time, the sounds of the forest surrounding them. Occasionally, Valric would stop, placing his hand on the rough bark of a tree or pressing his palm against the ground. The air would ripple around him, subtle at first, then stronger until Alara could feel the pulse of energy in the earth itself. "You have the mark," he said finally, breaking the silence. "It connects you not just to me, but to the life of the forest, to the magic that has existed since long before any kingdom. You will need to feel it, not just see it." Alara closed her eyes and focused. At first, all she felt was the cold night air against her skin, the soft sway of branches above. Then, gradually, a rhythm began to emerge, faint but steady, like the heartbeat of the world. The mark on her wrist pulsed in response, and a warmth spread through her, strong yet comforting. "So, this is the mark's power," she whispered. "Yes," Valric replied, watching her closely. "It gives you sight beyond sight, strength beyond the body, and the ability to sense those who mean harm. But it also binds you. The stronger the connection, the more it tests your heart and will." Alara opened her eyes, a sense of awe and purpose rising within her. "I feel it," she said. "I understand a little more now. It's part of me, part of everything around us." Valric nodded. "Good. That understanding will save you, and it will also bind you to me. The mark does not act in isolation. It is a chain that links hearts as much as it links blood." Alara shivered, not from cold, but from the weight of his words. She had always known the mark was powerful, but the idea of it tying her to the vampire king, to someone so ancient and untouchable, was more intense than she had imagined. Yet at the same time there was comfort in the connection, a strange sense of belonging she had never felt before. As they continued through the forest, a sudden movement caught Alara's attention. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, cloaked, and silent. The faintest glint of eyes reflected the moonlight, watching them. "Stay close," Valric whispered, moving slightly in front of her. His hand brushed hers, not in the teaching way of the past days, but in a protective gesture that made her heart skip. The figure made no sound but continued to follow them, staying just at the edge of the trees. Alara could feel its intent, a cold curiosity mixed with hunger for the power she carried. "Who is it?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "A shadow from the past," Veilric replied. "One who knows the curse, the mark, and the power it can give. He will not stop until he claims it for himself." Alara tightened her grip on the cloak, her pulse quickening. "Then we must be faster, stronger." Veilric turned his eyes toward her, the red glow bright in the dim light. "And you are," he said, "stronger than you know, but strength alone is not enough. You must learn to trust the mark and to trust yourself. Only then can you face what is coming." They moved deeper into the forest, the trees thickening and the shadows growing darker. At a small clearing, Veilric stopped and gestured for Alara to stand in the center. "Now," he said, "focus. Listen. Feel the rhythm of the world. Let the mark guide you." Alara closed her eyes again, and slowly she felt the energy surrounding her, the subtle pulse of life in the soil, the movement of creatures hidden in the underbrush, even the faint steps of the figure that followed them. The mark glowed softly and warmth spread through her, steadying her nerves and sharpening her senses. "You are learning quickly," Veilric said, standing behind her, his voice calm but strong. "Good. This skill will keep you alive." She opened her eyes and saw the figure again. It was moving closer, bold now, testing her. The mark on her wrist flared, and she felt a surge of power rush through her body. The figure stopped abruptly, as though sensing the change. "You see," Veilric whispered, "it responds to your will, to your courage. You have more control than you realize." Alara felt a mixture of pride and fear. I think I understand now," she said. "But what if I fail?" Veilric's gaze softened, though only for a moment. "Then we endure," he said. "We do not falter. The mark will test you as it has tested every bearer. But failure is not an end, it is a lesson." For hours they trained in the clearing, moving through exercises that tested both strength and will. Veilric taught her how to sense shadows, how to use the energy of the forest to shield herself, and how to draw power from the mark without losing herself. Each moment was exhausting, yet exhilarating, and each step brought them closer together in ways neither had expected. As night deepened, they finally rested near a small stream. The water reflected the moonlight in gentle ripples, and the forest seemed to exhale around them, quiet and still. "You are remarkable," Veilric said quietly, sitting beside her. "Few mortals could endure what you have today, and fewer still would continue with courage rather than fear." Alara smiled faintly, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire in the clearing. "I had help," she said softly. "You showed me the way." Veilric looked at her, and for a moment the centuries of sorrow in his eyes softened. "Perhaps," he said, "but it is your courage that carries you. Do not forget that." Suddenly, a rustle in the trees made both of them tense. The cloaked figure had returned, moving closer than ever before. Its intent was clear now, unwavering and dangerous, though no weapon was drawn. "They have found us," Veilric said, standing slowly. "We cannot avoid the confrontation any longer, but we will face it together." "Are you ready?" Alara nodded, gripping her mark. "I am ready," she said. "I will not falter." The figure stepped into the moonlight, revealing its face, shadowed and unreadable but full of intent. Veilric's eyes narrowed, and the air between them seemed to thrum with power. "Remember," Veilric said, placing a steady hand on her shoulder, "the mark is not just power. It is connection. Draw on it, trust yourself." Alara took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of energy in her veins, the warmth of the mark on her wrist, and the strange courage that came from standing beside someone who believed in her. As the figure advanced, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The shadows stretched long and dark, and the wind whispered secrets of the past and warnings of the future. Yet in the center of it all, Alara and Veilric stood together, hearts steady, will strong and destinies entwined. The figure stopped, sensing the strength they had gained, and slowly it withdrew into the darkness. It had tested them, and it had learned that this bond was not easily broken. But the danger was far from over. Veilric exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders for a brief moment. "This is only the beginning," he said. "Others will come. Shadows are patient and they do not forgive easily." Alara looked up at him, her eyes shining with determination. "Then we will face them," she said, "together." Veilric's gaze softened again, though only for a fleeting second. For the first time in centuries, he felt hope, not just for the mark, but for the bond they had formed, for the courage she had shown, and for the possibility that the darkness could be faced and endured without losing themselves. As they returned to the path leading toward safety, the forest seemed quieter now, almost reverent. The wind carried the faint scent of rain, the rustle of leaves, and the soft pulse of energy from the mark that bound them together. And somewhere deep within the shadows, the figure waited, patient and unyielding, for the moment when the next test would come. Alara did not yet know what lay ahead, but she felt it, the weight of destiny, the strength of connection, and the courage that came from standing beside someone who believed in her. The heart in chains had begun to beat, and the dance of shadows was far from over. The night sky over Ilarion was unlike any other. Clouds swirled as if stirred by some unseen hand, and the moon began to darken, swallowed slowly by the shadow of an eclipse. The rare event amplified the magic in the world, awakening forces both gentle and fierce. In the quiet of the castle courtyard, Veilric and Alara prepared for the challenge they had long sensed was coming. "The eclipse strengthens everything," Veilric said, his red eyes gleaming in the dim light. "The mark will pulse with more power than you have ever felt, but so will those who seek it. Tonight you must be vigilant. Every choice you make matters." Alara adjusted the cloak over her shoulders, feeling the familiar warmth of the mark against her skin. "I am ready," she said, though her pulse raced. "I will not falter, Veilric, not now." Veilric studied her for a moment, the centuries of caution in his gaze softening into something rare hope. "Then we face this together," he said. "Trust the mark and trust yourself, and trust me." The castle seemed to hold its breath as they moved toward the inner courtyard. Shadows twisted across the stone walls, and the faint hum of energy from the eclipse tingled in the air. Somewhere beyond the walls, creatures of the night stirred, sensing the power that was about to be claimed. Suddenly, from the darkness, the cloaked figure appeared once more. This time it did not hesitate. The figure moved with purpose, stepping into the light, revealing itself fully for the first time. Veilric's eyes narrowed, recognizing the intent immediately. "They have come," he said, "and they will not stop until the mark is theirs." Alara's heart pounded, but she stood firm, feeling the pulse of her mark grow stronger with each passing moment. The mark glowed beneath her sleeve, a warm light that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. It was no longer just a symbol, it was a bond, a guide, and a source of courage she had never known. "Remember," Veilric said, placing his hand lightly on her shoulder, "power alone is not enough. You must connect, focus, and face the shadow of your fears. Only then can the mark serve you fully." The cloaked figure advanced, but Alara did not hesitate. She stepped forward, letting the mark's energy flow through her. The air seemed to hum around her, bending slightly as if acknowledging her presence. The figure froze, sensing the surge of power she now wielded. Veilric moved beside her, their steps in perfect unison. "Together," he said, and the words were more than instruction, they were a promise. Alara took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment to center herself. She felt the pulse of the mark, the weight of her mother's courage, and the guidance of Veilric's presence. When she opened her eyes, the figure seemed smaller, less certain, as if the bond they shared had become a shield stronger than the darkness surrounding them. "You cannot take what does not belong to you," Veilric said, his voice carrying a quiet power. "The mark chooses, and it has chosen her." The figure hesitated, then slowly withdrew, as if recognizing the strength in their union. But Veilric knew this was only a temporary retreat. Others would come, drawn by the same hunger for power that had haunted the mark for centuries. Alara exhaled, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Is it over?" she asked softly. Veilric shook his head. "Not yet, but you have passed your first true test. And in doing so, you have shown that the mark is not a curse to fear, but a power to embrace. You have grown stronger, not just in ability, but in heart." Alara looked down at her wrist, the mark glowing faintly. "I feel it," she said. "I can feel the power and I can feel connection. It is part of me and part of something greater." Veilric nodded, his expression softening. "Yes, the mark does not isolate, it binds, it tests, and it redeems if one has the courage to face it fully." They walked through the castle, moving toward the central tower where the eclipse would reach its peak. The walls seemed alive, ancient and watchful, as if the castle itself acknowledged the turning of fate. Every step was heavy with anticipation, every shadow a silent reminder of the forces that lingered in the world. As they reached the tower, Veilric gestured for Alara to stand in the center of the chamber. Light from the eclipsed moon spilled through the high windows, casting long, shifting shadows across the floor. The energy in the air pulsed with intensity, the mark on Alara's wrist glowing brighter with each heartbeat. "Now," Veilric said, "you must embrace the mark fully. Not as a burden, but as a bond. Let it flow through you, connect you to me, to your mother, and to the courage you carry." Alara closed her eyes, reaching inward. She felt the power, felt the connection to Veilric, felt the echo of her mother's strength, and felt the pulse of the world around her. The mark responded, glowing with warmth, steady and strong. She exhaled, and when she opened her eyes, the chamber seemed brighter, the shadows softer, as if acknowledging her growth. Veilric stepped closer, placing a hand gently over hers. "You have done well," he said, "stronger than I imagined. The bond is no longer just power, it is trust, courage, and connection. You have earned the mark's respect." Alara smiled faintly, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment and relief. "It feels right," she said, "not just power but belonging." Veilric's eyes softened, the centuries of solitude momentarily lifted. "Yes," he said, "belonging is the true strength of the mark. It is not merely about control or survival. It is about connection, trust, and the courage to face destiny together." For a moment the two of them stood in silence, the eclipsed moon casting its pale light over the chamber. Shadows shifted and danced, but there was no fear, only a quiet understanding, a bond that had been forged through trials, trust, and courage. Then in the quiet, a soft sound reached their ears, a whispering, almost like the castle itself was speaking. "The line of the mark continues," it seemed to say. "The bond is eternal and the legacy endures." Alara looked at Veilric, her eyes wide with wonder. "The mark, it is not just a curse," she whispered. "It is a gift." Veilric nodded, a rare smile touching his lips. "Yes, a gift, if one has the courage to bear it and the heart to honor it." The eclipse reached its peak, the moon entirely shadowed, and the chamber was bathed in a surreal, silver light. Alara felt a warmth spreading through her, the connection between her, Veilric, and the mark stronger than ever. It was a bond not of fear, not of power alone, but of trust, courage, and shared destiny. "You have faced the heart of the curse," Veilric said softly, taking her hand in both of his. "And you have not faltered. That is more than many could claim." Alara felt a tear slip down her cheek, not of sorrow but of release. I understand now," she said. "The mark, it is not just about suffering. It is about strength, courage, and love." Veilric's gaze lingered on her, and in that moment, centuries of loneliness and sorrow seemed to fall away. The connection between them was no longer just teacher and student, king and bearer. It was something deeper, stronger, and unbreakable. The eclipse began to fade, the moon slowly reclaiming its light. Shadows softened, and the chamber felt alive with quiet energy, a silent promise that the bond they had forged would endure. Alara looked at Veilric, her heart steady, her spirit strong. "Whatever comes next," she said, We will face it together. Valeric nodded, his hand tightening over hers. Yes, he said, together. The mark is not a curse to fear. It is a path to redemption, courage, and connection. And now we walk it side by side. The castle walls seemed to sigh, as if acknowledging the bond they had formed and the trials they had endured. Outside, the forest whispered, the wind carried the faint scent of rain, and the night itself seemed to bow in quiet respect. And somewhere in the distant shadows, those who had sought the mark watched, silent and patient. But they would wait in vain, for the mark had chosen, and the bond had been sealed. Alara and Valeric stood together in the tower, hands clasped, hearts aligned, and spirits entwined. The darkness of the night, the trials of the past, and the weight of destiny were no longer chains. They were steps in a path they would walk together, strong, courageous, and unbroken. The eclipse had ended, but a new chapter had begun. In the quiet of the castle, under the moon's gentle light, the vampire king and the daughter of a servant stood together, bound not by fear, not by power, but by trust, courage, and the promise of a shared destiny that would endure beyond time.